Right before your life gets good, really good, in the way you've been quietly praying for, there's a warning almost nobody gives you. And Carl Jung spent decades watching what happens to people who didn't hear it. The money arrives. The recognition arrives. The relationship, the freedom, the version of life you kept promising yourself was coming. And then, somewhere in the middle of finally having it, something goes quietly wrong. Not because they didn't deserve it, because they carried something across the threshold that they were supposed to leave behind. Jung noticed this pattern in patients the rest of the world envied. People at the peak. People who had, on paper, everything a human being is supposed to want. And they came to him hollow, restless, sometimes falling apart in ways that made no sense to anyone looking from the outside. Because the outside looked like a dream. The inside felt like a haunting. What he discovered is one of the most uncomfortable truths in all of psychology, and it's the last thing you need to understand before your rich life begins. Whatever you don't face in yourself before you get what you want, you will meet again after you get it. Except now, it will be stronger, because you've handed it more power to work with. Today I want to walk you through exactly what Jung meant by this. Why abundance amplifies instead of heals. What specific part of you comes with you no matter how far you climb, and how to cross into the life you've been building without dragging the very thing that will quietly dismantle it. Because if you feel close right now, if you can sense the good chapter approaching, this is the warning that decides whether you'll actually get to live inside it, or just watch it slip through your hands while you wonder what went wrong. Let's start with the thing everyone gets backwards. Most people believe that success will fix them. Not consciously, of course. Nobody says it out loud. But underneath the ambition, there's a quiet bargain being made. A belief that once the money is there, once the achievement lands, once the life finally arrives, the ache that's been driving them will finally go quiet. The insecurity will resolve. The emptiness will fill. They'll become, at last, the person they've been trying to become. Jung watched this bargain fail over and over. Because the ache was never about the thing they were chasing. It came from somewhere deeper, somewhere the achievement couldn't reach. And when the achievement arrived and the ache was still there, sometimes louder than before, the person was left with a terror they'd never anticipated. If having everything didn't fix me, then what's actually wrong? He understood something the achievement culture around him refused to see. External abundance doesn't change your internal structure. It magnifies it. Whatever psychological pattern you carry into wealth, wealth will make bigger. If you're generous underneath, resources make you more generous. If you're frightened underneath, resources make you more frightened, because now you have something to lose. The money doesn't have a personality. It takes yours and turns up the volume. This is why Jung was so wary of the fantasy that a better life would produce a better person. He'd seen the opposite too many times. Give an unexamined man power, and you don't get a healed man with power. You get every unhealed thing in him, now equipped with the means to act. The cruelty he suppressed when he was powerless has an outlet. The insecurity he managed when he was ordinary becomes a bottomless pit that all his success pours into and never fills. He called this dynamic inflation. A specific kind of psychological swelling that happens when a person's ego gets flooded with more than it's ready to hold. Success is one of the most reliable triggers for it. You accomplish something significant, and a part of you quietly concludes that you are now significant. The achievement stops being something you did and starts being who you are. And the moment that happens, you've begun to lose contact with the ground. Inflation feels wonderful at first. That's the trap. You feel expanded, chosen, above the ordinary rules that bind everyone else. You start to believe your own momentum is proof of your specialness. And in that state, you stop questioning yourself, stop examining your motives, stop noticing the parts of you that never grew up alongside your circumstances. You've become large on the outside and unattended on the inside. And that gap is exactly where things break. Here's what makes this so dangerous, right at the threshold of a good life. When things are hard, you're forced to stay honest. Struggle keeps you humble because struggle keeps correcting you. But the moment life gets easy, that corrective pressure disappears. Nobody challenges the successful person the way life challenges the struggling one. The world starts agreeing with you, flattering you, removing your obstacles. And an unexamined psyche, with all its obstacles removed, is free to run in whatever direction it was always secretly heading. So the first piece of Jung's warning is this: the good life you're approaching won't be a test of whether you can handle happiness. It will be a test of whether you did your inner work before the outer work paid off. Because everything you avoided facing is about to be handed a much larger stage. And the thing you most avoided facing, the part of you that comes across every threshold, no matter how far you travel, Jung had a name for. He called it the shadow. The shadow is everything about yourself you decided long ago was unacceptable and pushed out of sight. Your envy, your rage, your greed, your neediness, the pettiness you'd never admit to, the hunger for revenge you tell yourself you're above. None of it disappeared when you rejected it. It went underground, into the basement of the psyche, and it's been there the whole time, running quietly beneath every decision you've made. Most people go their entire lives believing the shadow is gone simply because they can't see it. But Jung understood that what you can't see in yourself doesn't vanish. It drives. It leaks out sideways. It shows up in your reactions, your compulsions, the strange self-sabotage you can never quite explain. And when you finally get power, money, freedom, the shadow doesn't stay quiet. It comes up into the light with resources it never had before. Think about the person who spent their whole life feeling invisible and unimportant. Underneath, in the basement, there's a shadow starving for recognition, a raw, unmet hunger to finally matter. As long as they were ordinary, that hunger stayed manageable. Then success arrives. Suddenly people are watching, praising, wanting a piece of them. And that starving shadow, instead of being satisfied, discovers it can finally eat. It becomes insatiable. The recognition that was supposed to heal the wound becomes fuel for an addiction. They can never get enough, because the part being fed was never designed to be full. Or consider the person who grew up with scarcity so deep it lodged in their bones. Their shadow carries a terror of losing everything that no bank account can touch. Give them wealth, and you don't cure the terror, you give it more to protect. Now they lie awake guarding what they have, gripped by a fear that gets worse with every dollar, because every dollar is one more thing that could be taken. The abundance they thought would bring peace becomes the object of their deepest dread. This is the mechanism Jung was warning about. Not that success is bad, but that success is an amplifier plugged directly into your unconscious. And if you haven't turned around to look at what's living down there, you're about to broadcast it at full volume, to yourself, to the people you love, to the whole life you worked so hard to build. The most tragic version of this is what happens to relationships. Someone crosses into the rich chapter carrying an unfaced fear of not being loved for who they truly are. When they were struggling, that fear stayed dormant. But now they have things: status, money, access, and a poisonous question begins to grow. Do these people actually love me, or do they love what I can give them? Because they never learned to feel worthy on the inside, they can't trust the love arriving on the outside. And so they test it, sabotage it, push people away to see who stays. The very success that was supposed to make them more lovable becomes the reason they can no longer feel loved at all. Jung would have told you this is the shadow doing exactly what shadows do. It doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as reasonable suspicion, as legitimate fear, as the way things simply are. You experience it as reality rather than recognizing it as the unlived, unexamined part of yourself finally getting the room to run your life from behind the curtain. And this is where the warning gets sharper, because there's a particular kind of blindness that comes with success. When your life is going badly, you look for what's wrong with you. You self-examine, you doubt, you search for the flaw. But when your life is going well, self-examination feels unnecessary. Why would you dig for problems when everything's finally working? The result is that the exact moment you most need to face your shadow is the exact moment you feel least motivated to. Winning makes you feel like you've already solved yourself, and that illusion is precisely what lets the shadow take over unopposed. If you've been sensing that something in you needs attention even as your outer life is finally coming together, that quiet, inconvenient pull to look inward right when everything says you should just celebrate, that instinct is worth trusting. Our guide, True Self-Discovery, was built for exactly this crossing. 24 reflection exercises rooted in Jung's work, designed to help you meet the part of yourself that follows you everywhere, before it meets you first on the other side of everything you've earned. The link is right below. But stay with me, because the most important part of Jung's warning is what he discovered about the people who ignored it. The ones who crossed the threshold without doing the inner work followed a pattern so consistent, Jung came to recognize it almost immediately. There was a honeymoon first. The new life felt like everything they'd imagined: relief, pride, a sense of arrival. For a while, the achievement genuinely did quiet the ache, and they took that quiet as proof that they'd been right all along, that success was the answer. But the quiet never lasted. Slowly, the old feeling would creep back in, and this time it came with a confusion that was almost unbearable. They had everything now. There was no external reason left to feel this way. And so the emptiness, having nowhere legitimate to point, turned inward and became something worse. A sense of being fundamentally broken. Because if having the whole dream doesn't fix you, the only remaining explanation feels like there's something wrong with you at the root. This is the cruelest part of skipping the inner work. As long as you're chasing the goal, you have hope. You can always tell yourself that once you arrive, it'll be different. The goal holds your hope for you. But when you arrive and nothing fundamental changes, that hope has nowhere left to go. Jung saw people plunge into their darkest periods not in failure, but in the aftermath of getting exactly what they wanted. The success removed their last excuse and left them face to face with a self they'd been outrunning their entire lives. He watched some of them try to solve it the only way they knew how, by chasing a bigger goal. More money, more recognition, a newer, shinier version of the dream. And it would work again, briefly, the way a drink works for someone who's afraid to feel. The next achievement would quiet things for a season, and then the emptiness would return, a little deeper each time, requiring a little more to numb. This is how a person ends up with everything and still feels like they're drowning, forever reaching for the next thing that will finally be enough, never once turning around to face the one they've been running from. And underneath all of it sits the shadow, patient, well-fed, growing more powerful with every resource poured into avoiding it. So what does Jung's warning actually ask of you? It's not asking you to reject the good life. He wasn't against wealth or success or joy. He wanted people to have full, rich lives in every sense of the word. What he was asking is far more precise and far more difficult. He wanted you to turn around and meet yourself before the amplifier gets switched on. To walk into abundance already knowing what lives in your basement, so that when success turns up the volume, it amplifies something you've made peace with, rather than something that's been waiting in the dark to run wild. This is the work he called individuation, the slow process of becoming whole by integrating the parts of yourself you've disowned. And integration doesn't mean fixing the shadow or getting rid of it. It means bringing it into the light, looking at it directly, and taking responsibility for it, so that it stops driving from behind the curtain and becomes something you can actually hold. The person who has faced their hunger for recognition doesn't stop wanting to be seen, but they know the hunger is there, they know where it came from, and they no longer mistake it for their whole identity. So when the recognition comes, they can enjoy it without being enslaved by it. The person who has faced their scarcity terror still feels the flicker of fear, but they recognize it as an old wound rather than a message from reality. And so wealth becomes something they can steward instead of something they clutch. Integration doesn't remove the shadow, it changes who's holding the reins. Here's the part that surprises people. Facing your shadow before you cross the threshold isn't only protection against the dangers of success, it's what makes a rich life actually feel rich. Because the reason so many people arrive at everything and feel nothing is that they arrived as a fraction of themselves. They spent so many years cutting off the unacceptable parts that by the time they got what they wanted, there wasn't enough of them left inside to receive it. You can't feel the fullness of a good life through a self that's been amputated into a presentable shape. Jung understood that wholeness is what allows you to actually experience your own existence. The parts of you that you exiled, the anger, the hunger, the neediness, the darkness, they aren't only liabilities, they're also where your aliveness lives. The same suppression that keeps your rage in check also caps your capacity for passion. The same wall that holds back your neediness also blocks your ability to truly receive love. When you cut off the bottom of yourself, you cut off the depth. And depth is the only thing that can make a life feel like more than a set of accomplishments arranged for other people to admire. So, the invitation underneath the warning is enormous. Meet your shadow, and you don't just protect the rich life from being destroyed. You gain the capacity to feel it. You arrive whole enough to be filled by what you've built, instead of standing inside your own dream like a stranger, wondering why the thing you wanted for so long feels like it belongs to someone else. Let me tell you what this looks like in practice, because Jung was never interested in ideas that couldn't be lived. Picture someone standing right where you might be standing now, on the edge of the life they've been chasing. The offer is about to land, the door is about to open, and instead of sprinting through it, they pause. They take the strange, counterintuitive step of asking themselves what they're carrying that they haven't looked at. They sit with uncomfortable questions. What am I hoping this success will finally prove? What have I been telling myself I'll feel once I get there? What part of me is starving, and am I expecting this achievement to feed it? They notice the places where their ambition is really a wound wearing a suit. They find the child inside them who decided long ago that being enough required being extraordinary, and they meet that child instead of using their whole adult life to run errands for its fear. None of this feels good in the moment. Turning toward your own shadow is genuinely uncomfortable. It means admitting things about yourself you'd rather not know. But the person who does this crosses the threshold differently. They walk into abundance without expecting it to save them, which, paradoxically, is the only way it can truly bless them. They enjoy the money without needing it to make them worthy. They receive the love without testing it to death. They accept the recognition without dissolving into it. Because the worthiness, the security, the sense of being enough, they built those on the inside first, before the outside ever confirmed them. And when the amplifier switches on, as it always does, it amplifies a person who's already whole. The generosity gets bigger, the steadiness gets bigger. The capacity to love and be present and actually feel their own life gets bigger. This is what Jung meant by a rich life in the fullest sense, not just full hands, but a full self capable of holding what the hands have gathered. Contrast that with the version who runs through the door without looking back. Same success, same money, same opportunity, but they arrive as a collection of unmet needs wearing the costume of a winner, and the amplifier turns all of it up at once. Their hidden hunger becomes a public appetite nothing can satisfy. Their buried fear becomes a fortress they can never leave. Their unfaced shadow, now equipped with everything it ever wanted, quietly begins dismantling the very life that gave it power. And from the outside, no one can understand it. They have everything. Why are they falling apart? The answer Jung spent his life trying to make people hear. They never faced what they brought with them. They thought the threshold was the finish line, when it was really the beginning of the truest test, whether the self walking into the rich life was whole enough to survive its own success. There's one more layer to this warning, and it's the one people resist the most. Jung believed that the shadow doesn't only carry your darkness, it also carries what he called your gold, the disowned potential, the buried gifts, the parts of your greatness you exiled because they scared you or because someone taught you they weren't allowed. Sometimes the thing you're most afraid to face isn't your worst quality, it's your best one, the one that would demand you become far more than you've let yourself be. Some people stand on the edge of the rich life and unconsciously shrink back, sabotaging the very moment they've worked toward, because arriving would mean owning a size of themselves they've spent years avoiding. It's easier to stay small and blame circumstance than to step fully into your own capacity and become responsible for it. Meeting the shadow means claiming that gold too. It means letting yourself be as large as you actually are, which for many people is more frightening than staying wounded. So the warning cuts in both directions. Cross the threshold without facing your darkness, and it will run your life from underneath. Cross it without claiming your gold, and you'll spend your good life quietly betraying it, playing small inside a big opportunity, never quite letting yourself become the person the moment is asking you to be. Wholeness requires both, the courage to hold your worst and the courage to inhabit your best. If this is landing somewhere real in you, if you can feel that you're standing at a threshold and there's work waiting to be done before you cross it, that's exactly the moment true self-discovery was made for. Its 24 reflection exercises are built to walk you into your own basement gently, to help you meet both the shadow and the gold you've been carrying, so you don't arrive at the life you wanted as a stranger to yourself. You'll find it linked below, and if the warning in this has reached you, that's the door worth walking through first. Because here's what I most want you to take with you. The reason this warning matters isn't to frighten you away from the good chapter. It's to make sure you're actually there for it when it comes. Too many people spend their whole lives building a life they're too fragmented to inhabit. They pour everything into the outside and leave the inside untended, and then abundance arrives and finds no one home to receive it. Jung's entire body of work was an argument against that fate. He believed the point of a human life wasn't to accumulate, but to become, to grow into a self large enough and honest enough to hold whatever life delivers. The wealth, the success, the love, the freedom, none of it is the destination, it's the material. What you build with it and who you are while you build is the actual life. And you cannot build something whole out of parts of yourself you refuse to look at. The construction always fails at the point of the fracture. That's not a punishment, it's just the structure of the psyche. What you exile, you empower. What you face, you integrate. What you integrate, you're finally free to use. So as you stand here, close to something good, I'd ask you to take Jung's warning not as a threat, but as an act of care from someone who watched too many people arrive and lose themselves anyway. Before the money, before the recognition, before the life you've been aching for finally opens its door, turn around. Look at what you're carrying. Meet the parts of you that have been running the show from the dark, not because they're monsters, but because they're yours, and they're coming with you whether you look at them or not. The choice was never whether to bring your shadow across the threshold. You will. Everyone does. The choice is whether you'll cross with your eyes open, holding your whole self on purpose, or whether you'll cross blind and let the unexamined parts of you inherit everything you built and quietly spend it on old wounds. Jung staked his life's work on the belief that the first path, as hard and as humbling as it is, leads somewhere the second never can. To a rich life you can actually feel, to success that expands who you are instead of exposing what you never faced, to the strange and rare experience of getting what you wanted and discovering there's a self present enough to be filled by it. That self is available to you, but it has to be met before the amplifier turns on, not after. And the fact that you feel the threshold approaching means the time to turn around is now, while the door is still opening, while there's still a quiet moment before everything gets loud. The rich life is coming. The only question Jung would ask you is the one that decides everything. Who's going to be standing there to receive it? The whole you, or only the parts you were willing to look at? If you haven't yet, take a look at our guide, True Self-Discovery, 24 reflection exercises rooted in Jung's work, made for exactly this crossing you're standing at. A way to meet yourself fully before the life you've built asks you to hold it. The link is right below.